Hi, Don and May. How's your morning going?
Okay. Can't complain.
That's terrific. We don't have any hair!
My name is Casey Simpson, and I played Ricky Harper on Nicky, Ricky, Dicky, and Dawn. And I think that show, the Thundermans, iCarly, and Wizards of Waverly Place, reveal a lot about what we value as a society. And since we were kids when we watched it, by osmosis, it fundamentally shaped what we think is important. And I'm gonna tell you why. Why you're a product of what Nicky, Ricky, Dicky, and Dawn told you. So everyone knows the high school stock stereotypes, the jocks, the nerds, goths, popular girls, cheerleaders, the theater kids. These tropes are so familiar that they have been played ironically in shows like Glee and Mean Girls. And I, like most of you, grew up watching the shows on Nick and Disney. Drake and Josh, Victorious, Hannah Montana, even Pair of Kings, if anyone remembers that show. Before I was on NRDD, I idolized these shows and would have thought it a dream to actually be on one. And until recently, I never connected these two things, or was even conscious of my personal thought process I'm about to tell you, but I'm gonna make a confession. For a long time, particularly surrounding childhood or teenage rites of passage, my conscious experience has been very self-referential. What am I talking about? I'm saying that before my first kiss, I was very conscious of the concept of a first kiss, but not just the concept of a first kiss, what it meant, making it special in the context of a big social dynamic with the girl other people chose for me, or it being very romantic and natural, or for a school ditch day wouldn't just be one day off school with no set expectations. It was my chance to fully capture the concept of a high school ditch day. And if it didn't live up to that, something was wrong. At least if it didn't live up to what my understanding of what it's supposed to be. There's a condition psychologists call birthday depression, where people are more likely to be unhappy on their birthday or holidays like Christmas because they have such high expectations for it going right. The same concept is explored vis-a-vis a vacation on the White Lotus. I'm going to call this connotative awareness of theoretical early life milestones fustalgia, from future nostalgia, because it's this vague set of expectations for things you haven't done yet. On my last example of the high school ditch day, we can, of course, trace some of this back to Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but I didn't watch that movie until I was older. But the concept had nonetheless seeped into the culture. I grew up in it so deeply that I didn't need to have seen the movie. I think this is true for a lot of things for our generation. The reason, which I'm going to talk about, is because an original culture that past generations had has been imitated and altered for us. There's an episode of The Fairly Odd Parents that has haunted me for many years, that I hope someone else remembers, that I wasn't the only one traumatized. In the episode, It's a Wishful Life, Timmy helps clean his parents' lawn and Cosmo's fishbowl, but he doesn't feel appreciated. So this 10-year-old cartoon boy wishes that he never existed.
Let's see how everyone would like it if I weren't around to not appreciate. I wish I was never born.
And Wanda's like, all right. So they erase him from existence! This is like 2 minutes into the episode. And then he gets a chance from Jorgen von Strangle to see what the world is like without him in it. He looks around, and I'm not kidding, everyone is way happier that Timmy never was born. His parents love their daughter way more, they're way richer and living their dream life.
Ooh, check it out, honey. It says here that our beautiful, talented, not boy daughter Sophia is going to get nominated for another Academy Award!
Then, in an inversion of the original Guardian Angel, Jorgen von Strangle comes as the Grim Reaper and says the world is a much better place, definitively, and everyone is much happier because Timmy was never born.
Wait! Somebody's life has to be worse without me around.
Let me save you some time. No, everyone's life is better.
Mind you, Timmy is supposed to be the surrogate for the kids in the audience here. The bully is kind, Timmy's middle school teacher is at Harvard, his bald friend has hair, his fairy godparents like their new kid way better, the Cubs win the World Series, and then Jorgen sends Timmy to hell and says the world is better without him. But Timmy tricks Jorgen into going to hell instead by falling. And without learning anything or having any redemption, Timmy decides to make everybody's life worse and be born. But just when you think it can't get any worse, Timmy decides everyone's life shouldn't be made worse by him, existing, and so he finally accepts that it'd be better if he didn't exist and asks Jorgen to make his erasure permanent. And that was the lesson he was supposed to learn, that he makes everyone sad, and he should die. Well, Jorgen rises from hell and praises him for making the right moral choice. But he then, Timmy wishes to be born anyway, forever knowing he's ruining the lives of everyone around him by not killing himself. Of course, I didn't know when I was 6 that this was a demonic inversion of It's a Wonderful Life, where George Bailey learns that the people around him really do love him and want him in their life. And that's true in all these kids' shows. They use old phrases and refer to things I'd never heard of. Like our second episode of Nicky, Ricky, Dicky, and Dawn was called The Quadfather as a send-up of The Godfather, something I, of course, had no awareness of. The point is, I never saw a movie and was like, my life has to be just like that, and was upset when it wasn't. It's rather that I had a perennial consciousness of the way each of the bigger moments in my young life were supposed to go. I talked with my friend about this, and he said he felt the opposite. That he felt it was cringy on prom night to sort of spend the night with his date because that was so cliched. But the awareness was still there, even if he was using it as a standard to rebel against and not follow. It was the water we were swimming in. That's a reference to David Foster Wallace, who famously talked about that idea here.
There are these 2 young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the 2 young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell is water?"
I think David also talks about a similar kind of theme to the self-awareness of childhood milestones I mentioned when he says this.
The language of images maybe not threatens, but completely changes actual lived life. And I consider that my grandparents, by the time they got married and kissed, I think they had probably seen maybe 100 kisses. They'd seen people kiss 100 times. My parents, who grew up with mainstream Hollywood cinema, had seen thousands of kisses by the time they ever kissed. Before I kissed anyone, I had seen tens of thousands of kisses, of people kissing. I know that the first time I kissed, much of my thought was, am I doing it right? Am I doing it according to how I've seen it?
On that note exactly, a lot of the girls I've known have told me that they've practiced for their first kiss with each other, as if their first kiss was this event that needed rehearsal, like the opening night of a play. That didn't happen 50 years ago, let alone 100. I also thought about an insight. I remember someone saying that we all talk about Oedipus complexes when none of us have, read Oedipus or even Freud. And in a similar way, these ideas have become so ubiquitous, the ones that come from TV. But it wasn't always this way. I'm going to tell you how Nicky, Ricky, Dicky, and Dawn and the Thundermans made you who you are, and what shows used to make kids into instead. As I start this, you can see I'm wearing my Nickelodeon All That sweatshirt. I'm arguing that kids' TV shows can be divided into premodern, modern, postmodern, and post-postmodern categories. The distinctions aren't hard and fast, but I think they reveal a lot. To oversimplify a very important set of categories, for our purposes, premodern art is trying to capture something outside of the artist and their artwork. Think of Renaissance artists trying to capture the beauty of God or God's creation. Raphael's Sistine Madonna, Michelangelo's The Creation of Adam, or Leonardo da Vinci trying to capture the subtlety and beauty of a woman named Lisa del Giocondo in the Mona Lisa. This all changed when, in the late 19th century, the Impressionists, a group of artists, rebelled against the standards of the time, specifically those of the French Académie des Beaux-Arts, and they instead went for a new kind of art called Impressionism that became less about capturing something real outside of yourself that you want to see and put into an artwork. It was instead about the feelings or aesthetic that you felt about something in the outside world, the impression it gave. The art itself was not trying to be a window into something else. It was also trying to be artwork, with flourishes unique to its medium that weren't in the external object of a painting. Famously, Van Gogh was an impressionist, and thereby modernist. He wasn't trying to show in Starry Night a view of the real Saint-Remy de Provence. He was showing how he felt about it from his insane asylum, which is why it has such memorable creative ornamentation. Postmodernism in art emerged in the mid-20th century as a reaction against the rigid principles of modernism, or the idea of there being progress in art, people learning techniques and objectively getting better. And it came from a place of skepticism and jadedness. It embraced irony and the everyday. It gained momentum through movements like pop art and conceptual art, and this created some beloved works like Warhol's Marilyn Monroe Silkscreen, and also works that would never have been considered art before, like a rock, as seen in the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, or famously a urinal by Marcel Duchamp, who once said, "Whatever the artist spits is art." 200 years ago, kids read fables and religious tracts like the New England Primer, that was about getting those kids to learn to be more like some external ideal, often religious. Then came adventure books like Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, that became about the kids going on adventures as adventures. Adventures for adventure's sake, not in order to grasp some external object. That really resonates with me because my whole childhood, I, and it felt like everyone around me, saw adventures as a good in and of itself. Not an adventure to do some good or solve some problem, but to go on an adventure, a very self-aware modernist conception. Then today we have books specifically made for kids, like Dr. Seuss or Red Fish, Blue Fish, that doesn't have an external moral, or if they do, it's secondary to the fun, almost nonsense of the words, or the photos in the story, like Cat in the Hat or Are You My Mother, that are designed to be appealing to kids' attention spans. Alright, now we understand these conceptual categories, let's look at TV. Hey, it's me from the future. I wanted to make sure that these categories were clear when it came to TV, so when I'm talking pre-modern and broad strokes, what I'm saying is the show was sort of a medium for something else, like 1950s morality of families. And then, starting in the 60s with Brady Bunch in 69 until Henry Danger in 2020, the modern shows were aware of themselves as shows and reflected some kind of external ideals, but they also just were about being TV shows and being entertaining and maybe teaching some lessons every week, but in a very format that was aware of itself as a show and trying to create a good show, not necessarily create a good society or something outside of the show. And then we get to the postmodern era and we just abandon TV and we just have a bunch of YouTube challenges of people dying or being thrown in weird cardboard prisons that are bright, shiny for kids to pay attention to so they can stay on their iPads. And then finally, hopefully, we get a little shift away from that towards less ironic detachment, but more ironic sincerity, a rejection of the postmodern paradigm that we should just tear it all down. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to explain it with these shows. The 60s were a major cultural turning point. It was the first time that the focus of a culture was not on the parents or the family unit as a whole, but the kids. This had never happened before. And this is important to keep in mind because what do Nicky, Ricky, Dicky, and Dawn try to do in like every episode? Be more independent than the parents who shelter them. Here's a video from people around at that time explaining how the 60s were the start of a focus on kids in the culture.
The parents of the 1950s were, I think, the most unusual generation of the 20th century. These are the people who had grown up in the Depression. They had experienced real tough times when they were children and when they were teenagers. And then World War II hit, as many of them were just reaching adulthood, and they had the trauma of the war. And then, after all that, they reached the 1950s at a time when the U.S. was tremendously prosperous, when the economy was booming as we've never seen it before. And I think they reacted to that prosperity, and I think they reacted strongly to all of the trauma of the Depression and the war by turning inward a bit, by marrying young, by emphasizing home and family.
It was a perfect setting in which the youth culture, in a certain sense, could blossom. Life in the suburbs was organized around the kids again. They were the center of attention, endless round of Little League games and PTA meetings, etc. So it was in the suburbs, in a certain sense, that this message about the importance and the uniqueness and the generational potency associated with these kids, I think, was delivered with real force.
In the average American family today, children are the object of more concentrated thought and concern than the young of any previous generation. For out of an increasing understanding of child psychology has come an awareness that children are real people with individual personalities which must be respected and encouraged.
This was a distinctly new way to be raised in the world. And it allowed for a whole generation that I suppose we would now call spoiled kids, which from another point of view simply meant kids who had very high expectations in life with respect to freedom and happiness. They thought life was about being free and about being happy. And they carried those expectations forward into high school and into college, and brought with them a kind of a level of expectation that was simply unprecedented in, I would say, in world history.
And here it is, the American family of the 1950s, as it was seen thousands of evenings on TV. Happy kids, happy father, happy mother. Everyone behaving as they were supposed to.
You know, it's none of my business, but don't you think taking writing lessons is a pretty expensive way to meet a girl?
The message was absolutely unmistakable. This was the way your life should be. And if it wasn't, something must be very wrong.
The post-war boom in America created unprecedented prosperity, stability, and a baby boom. So for the first time, kids had their own culture. Elvis, the Beatles, the familiar high school stereotypes, rock and roll, that all starts in the 60s. Before this period, there are famous entertainers like Louis Armstrong or Clark Gable, but they're famous to kids and adults alike. In the 60s, that starts to diverge, where the kids watch the Beach Boys and the adults stick with Frank Sinatra.
The arrival of rock and roll in my life was like something that came from another planet. We hadn't heard anything like that sound before. We hadn't heard people making that kind of noise, breaking all limits of politeness.
Irony is the adults who thought of rock and roll as an act of rebellion, while the kids said it's not, it's just music, those adults were right.
Hey, they ain't mad, are they? No, that's the way kids are dancing nowadays. They call it rock and rolling or pop or something like that.
It was a rebellion against suburbia. It was a rebellion for me against all of the conventions that seem to make life so stifling.
In the 60s, for good or for ill, you see a renunciation of the previous values and a focus on the kids as the most important part of the culture, who are then the baby boomers. Now let's talk about how this affects TV. The first important note is that kids' TV used to not exist. The first kids shows didn't even premiere in the US until 1950, and even then, the only real kids shows were cartoons or puppet shows. The first show to center a teenager was called The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, and this move of centering the kids' experience caused the star of the show looking back to reflect, listen to this, the show represented the end of innocence of the 1950s, before the oncoming 1960s revolution, where the kids were centered. The show was a harbinger of what was to come. Previous shows that featured teenagers were about the parents, with teenagers as the accessories. The show that made a superstar out of Ricky Nelson was about a family of 4 with boys who became teenagers. And yet the show was called The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, the names of the parents. Can you imagine NRDD being called The Adventures of Tom and Ann? Now, TV and sitcoms particularly are already a bit of a modernist medium, but in this context, I'm going to say the pre-modern family sitcom era is from The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet in 1952 to the premiere of The Brady Bunch in 1969. The modernist era is from The Brady Bunch in 69 until the cancellation of Henry Danger in March 21, 2020. The same week, lockdowns began. A lot of earlier modernist shows like All in the Family, Family Ties, or The Wonder Years are remarkable, at least compared to the Nick and Disney shows we grew up with, because they're so overtly political. Family Ties, which was the biggest show for kids and families throughout most of the 80s, saw the parents deciding whether or not to buy a gun. The family split over their support or opposition to the Equal Rights Amendment, which was an amendment that was supposed to codify equal rights under the law for women. And I'm not kidding. In season 1, the 15-year-old daughter Mallory gets molested on screen by her uncle. And the episode is about them talking about that and resolving it. I'm serious. This is a kids and family show. As the modernist era went on, the format of the show became a bit hollowed out, to the point where, though there were still some good stories in Nick and Disney shows, Josh Being Done comes to mind, the format lost its heart and kind of avoided talking about real issues. There was certainly no politics, and instead of the gimmicks are bigger and more colorful and absurd to hold attention. Another harbinger of an era to come. Fun fact, Nicky, Ricky, Dicky, and Dawn's 1 hour special is just Drake and Josh's 1 hour special. They're both about the family winning a vacation where they lose their bags and get kidnapped in Hollywood and have to escape only to find out that it was part of the vacation the whole time. And what's amazing about this is they're both called Go Hollywood. Okay, which brings us to the postmodern era we're in now. Have you noticed there are no shows on Nick and Disney anymore? They're gone. They tried to do a spin-off of Henry Danger, but Gen Alpha kids aren't watching whatever the networks are literally playing. We've moved on to the postmodern kids television era, where instead of shows, there's just sensationalist effects and vlogs about amorphous monsters or challenges on YouTube. In a real show, these characters would learn a moral lesson at the end, or develop and change as people you can relate to. We've gone from shows that had writing and characters to just trying to capture the iPad kid's attention as long as you can, with the bright effects and intense story of running from whatever vague monster or challenge you're doing that week. Like the shift from adventure novels to kids' picture books with bright, shiny words. Lucky for us, to illustrate the difference of these eras, there's one storyline that recurs in a show from each of these eras. So we get to see how each era handles the story of their young son running away from home and the different reactions and framing of this problem. In Leave It to Beaver of the pre-modern era, Beaver, the young boy, stands by while his friend drills holes in their garage wall, and his father rather mildly admonishes him for breaking the rules.
I feel that you're more to blame than Larry, because I've told you time after time never to touch my tools.
But Dad, Larry
What you did shows that you have very little respect for what I tell you.
Beaver is very clearly unreasonably upset by this, and announces he will pack his things and maybe become a pirate.
Larry drilled the holes, and Dad said it was more my fault than his. That's being too mean. I might run away and join some pirates and come back with a wooden leg.
The problem is very individual in scope and frames Beaver's disobedience in running away as unwarranted, if albeit a bit endearing because of his age and fanciful notions. The whole time he plans on running away, everyone's aware of it, and his dad lets him go to teach him a lesson. The dad even gives him a chance to talk it over, but Beaver refuses, demonstrating how much of a tantrum this is on his part.
So you're leaving home, huh?
Yes, sir. And I'm not never coming back.
Well, don't you want to talk it over?
No, sir. Well, I'm really going.
So you said. Don't suppose you'd want to have your supper first.
No.
I'll tell your mother you've gone.
Thank you. Well, goodbye.
Bye.
And his dad just lets him go, because he and the audience see how absurd it is. It's actually a great scene, the way Beaver looks at him confused. And he has that feeling of, I'll prove it to them, I'll show them, right? He's a 6-year-old. We're supposed to see that it's understandable, if not a bit absurd, and clearly on him for being unreasonable in this scenario. But I personally relate to that feeling a lot, and I think a lot of us have, this sort of vague, amorphous indignation about how everyone's wrong about you and how special you really are, and proving your parents or society or the kids in school wrong. And I think small moments like these in television really help us see that in other people and realize that deep down, we're not this different thing from everyone around us. Here's Craig Ferguson talking about this in a really compelling way.
I woke up that morning. Now, this is the mind of an alcoholic. I woke up that morning, Christmas morning, and I thought, you know, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to kill myself today. I'm going to do it today. And what I did was, I thought, I made a plan as I'm getting myself together. I thought, I'll go down to Tower Bridge in London, which is the one that goes, you know, that one, and I'll swan dive to my death. I don't know how to swan dive, but I was going to do it. And I thought, by showing, by doing this, I'll show them. I didn't even know who they were, but I was going to show them. I was desperate. I was desperately confused and desperately twisted and turned upside down by whatever the hell was going on in my head.
Yeah. Wow. But in Leave It to Beaver, Beaver's insubordination, even with those feelings Craig Ferguson talked about as a 6-year-old, is framed as wrong, as opposed to the feelings being right and them needing to be indulged and discussed. In the end, Beaver just goes next door and has dinner, and his mom picks him up. Throughout the episode, the dad is the clear authority, but not as much as you might think, with the mom even going to pick him up against the father's judgment, who thinks Beaver needs to learn his lesson. And also what's interesting is the dad learns a lesson too at the end of the episode, that he should have gone after Beaver and been less harsh to try to teach him a lesson.
How did you feel when your father didn't come after you?
Well, I felt pretty bad.
Then how come you didn't come after me?
But in the end, Beaver is still clearly in the wrong, and there's a clear hierarchy and moral universe.
Here's the story of a lovely lady who was bringing...
This comparison with the modernist Brady Bunch is perfect, because it follows a kid the same age as Beaver, Bobby, running away. Bobby's feeling upset because he has to wear hand-me-downs, his sisters make fun of what he's wearing, and they go out without him. Plus, he also has some fanciful notions about step-parents being bad from watching Cinderella. So in this setup, we can see there's clearly some fanciful stuff on the kid's part, just like for Beaver in his worry about Cinderella. But also, the show for the first time plays his discontent like it's a real grievance. The audience feels a bit bad for Bobby, in a way you didn't for Beaver. It feels like, in a small way, he's being mistreated. In fact, Bobby is running away just as his parents are feeling bad for him, so they're out buying him a bike. Although they do still have the self-awareness to ultimately not get him the bike, because they feel it would just be them trying to win his love through gifts. It's still played like he's overreacting by leaving, but unlike with Beaver, it seems like part of the problem is his environment. It's less personal responsibility of the kid, and a bit of a critique of his authority structures, in a way foreign to the pre-modern Leave It to Beaver. And we've got such a perfect comparison, because just like in Leave It to Beaver, the dad catches the son as he's running away. In Leave It to Beaver, the dad lets him go. In the Brady Bunch, the father asks Bobby about his feelings, and even says,
You know, when a person isn't happy where he is, he has every right to look for a place where he can be happier. But I don't want any son of mine staying when he doesn't want to. You wouldn't want me to stay around if I didn't want to, would you?
And then goes on to make an emotional appeal to Bobby, before doing the same trick as in Leave It to Beaver of letting him go. But it's with an emphasis on understanding and validating his reasons for wanting to run away.
Don't you like it here anymore? You know what beats me is how very wrong we were. We all love you. We thought you loved us too.
Oh, I do. It's just, well, I better be going.
And again, he emphasizes the idea, I don't want anyone staying if he doesn't want to. The father says this, as if the family isn't about obligations each member has to another, like in Leave It to Beaver, but based on each member's momentary personal happiness and satisfaction. It ends with the mom offering to run away with Bobby, and a speech about how much people care about him. And then they write the line of the century. Bobby's insecure about being his mom's stepson and not her real son, and she says the only steps in this house are the ones in this staircase. Yes, you gotta see this.
I didn't think anybody cared. Oh, sweetheart, everybody cares. And I'll bet you your baseball card you can't guess who cares the most. You? Listen, the only steps in this house are those.
Oh, that's too good. Okay, the third show we're looking at is The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. This would still fall in the modernist school, but it's much later than the Brady Bunch. And guys, this is amazing. Okay, listen to this. Zack runs away to be with his dad by sneaking onto his dad's RV tour bus because he says his mom is no fun and always asks him to do his homework. And then his mom, who has told him very explicitly he cannot go with his dad, doesn't want him to be with his dad, and knows it's not at all a good environment for a 10-year-old kid where they're all playing poker and probably doing some other stuff. Not as a tactic to get him home. She says, okay, stay with your dad.
Why don't you just keep him with you?
If I make him come home now, he'll resent me more than ever.
What's she saying? Did she say I can stay?
Well, yeah, but...
Yay! Thanks, Mom. Love you. Bye.
And then this ending line made me laugh.
I didn't get to talk to her.
That's because you don't know her.
And now I never will.
At this stage of late modernism, the shows also get more cartoonish. Like, famously, shows like I Love Lucy had Three Stooges-like gimmicks in the chocolate factory scenes. But though they were silly, they were plausible. Here, you start to just get very cheap laughs as shows start to target specifically kids at this point. Remember, the Brady Bunch was a family show. Sweet Life is a kid's show. Like, look at this clip, where Maddie is trying to get in shape and she can't even lift empty plastic bags.
For your upper body strength, I brought you these. Shopping bags. Arms up. Go!
The shows are starting to stop being about something and just aim to hold the attention and have punchlines for kids, no matter how dubious the joke's premise to get there. The episode also deals a lot with Zack's mom's sadness at his being gone, and how much she needs him, which was not the case in Leave It to Beaver or the Brady Bunch, where the emphasis was on how much the kids need the parents and how naive they are to think they temporarily will be okay without them.
You heard from Zack?
Yeah, I sent him a 5-page email asking him how he's doing, if he's having fun, telling him how much I miss him. Here's his reply.
Back at you.
Back at me!
Oh, okay. Oh.
Even when Beaver's mom worries for him, it's about his safety. Not that he is not around, or that she feels like he doesn't need her. In fact, in order to win over her kids more, which, if you'll recall, is explicitly what the Brady Bunch parents rejected in not buying a bike for Bobby, Zack and Cody's mom starts giving ice cream for dinner.
Ah, forget homework. Let's have some fun. Hope you brought your sweet tooth, because I'm thinking ice cream for dinner.
Also, the feelings of the kids are centered again when Zack and the audience is saddened to hear that his dad only invited him on the road because he thought his mom wouldn't say yes.
Why'd you ask me to come?
I never thought your mom would say yes.
Oh.
The sympathy has been firmly placed on the kid rather than with the family unit and upholding the structure. And also for the first time, the kid comes home, Zack in this case, when he decides he wants to come home, and that'll make him happy compared to the alternative of running away.
When this started out, it was great. We had a lot of laughs, a lot of fun, but I just can't live this way anymore. Don't take this the wrong way, but I'm going home to Mother.
And if he didn't feel that way, it's implied he wouldn't come back. And in perhaps the most obvious sign of the roles of parents and kids by this point in modernist television occurs at the end of the episode where they have this laugh after all is resolved.
Boys, I'll be back in a couple of months. Now remember, do your homework, brush your teeth, and do everything your mom tells you.
Of course, that never would have happened in the Brady Bunch or Leave It to Beaver. This also happens in NRDD, funny enough. In The Quadfather, when Tom and Ann are sad and upset that kids don't need them to plan their birthday.
We all decided we're old enough to plan our own parties. Sorry, but we're growing up, Ann.
Oh, yeah? Well, planning parties is harder than you think. You'll see. They'll see, right, Tom?
Oh, they'll see. They think they're so grown up. They'll see how much they need us. They'll see! They need me.
Leave it to me, Beaver. It's mommy time.
Hey, Casey from the future back again. I realized that I looked at Beaver running away in the pre-modern era, and then Brady Bunch and Zack and Cody in the early and late modern era, and I didn't have a show from the postmodern era, but like, I thought it's because there's no shows anymore. It's just like effects on YouTube and challenges and bright lights, big city. But I looked it up, and apparently there's also, in the postmodern era, storylines about the kid running away. But it's not a story. It's not like character. I can't even compare it in the sense of, oh, the parents thought this or the parents didn't think this. It's just like, it's not about the characters or any kind of theme or moral. It's just about finding the kid. Like that adventure part. Like looking around. So there's no even like comment if it's good or bad or anything. Or do we learn anything about like the character. It's just trying to be like, what's happening next? You know, like a cliffhanger type thing. the whole time. So like, here's a little of that, but it's not even comparable, I think, to its forerunners.
Now I've got to tell you, I have some sad news. Kids shows are over. They're gone. At least live action shows aimed at slightly older kids, like Hannah Montana. This is a distinct genre. Shows from the 50s to the 90s, from Dennis the Menace to Growing Pains, were shows that were family friendly, targeting kids and parents together, or teens. The live action kids shows aimed at older kids genre started on June 17, 2000, with the premiere of Even Stevens, and ended on March 21, 2020, with the close of Henry Danger, which, my fellow Zoomers, you might also recall, as of course the week lockdowns started. That was the end of a 20-year era. Have you ever asked yourself recently why aren't there any new kids shows on Nick and Disney, like Nicky Ricky was one of the last ones? That genre is gone. Forever. Nicky, Ricky, Dicky, and Dawn was one of the last ones. Which brings us to the obvious question, what replaced it? What is now that demo watching?
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm...
Unfortunately, in my opinion, they're on YouTube shows that, much like the artistic shifts from Van Gogh to Pollock or Tom Sawyer to Dr. Seuss, is emphasizing simply catering to kids' attention. It's not about character growth or even story, just keeping kids engaged as long as you can. It's a lot of contrived plots and characters, over-the-top thumbnails with plots that don't even make sense to older kids, but we still have one more group left that we haven't talked about. There's hope. The postmodern shows that have a sense of unironic emotional stakes while continuing on and not departing from the modernist traditions that preceded it.
Andy, I'm not your sister. I'm your mother.
Andy Mack, unlike almost all the other Nick and Disney shows of the time, doesn't feature a laugh track and has heavy moments on things like teen pregnancy and panic attacks. They've recaptured sincerity, but with weighty stories that don't always get resolved the way they did in every Leave It to Beaver episode, in a trend that mimics Gen Z's postmodern turn towards sincerity. My Old Ass, this strange movie that has a lot of postmodern elements, making fun of itself and using very Gen Z language.
On my last birthday card you wrote, "I'd wish you a happy birthday, but cis white men don't need any more happiness."
Is another turn towards sincerity, because through it all, this girl has some real encounters with the outside world and responsibilities to her family that her older self helps her appreciate. Kids have had their own distinct culture since the 1960s. TV reflects that. And here's the distinction. It comes in what kids are. In the pre-modern shows of the 50s, and consequently the kids of the 1950s, being a kid was a cocoon stage that you underwent before becoming what you're on track to be and what you're supposed to be, an adult. Modernist shows like NRDD, where the kids are always trying to gain autonomy, show the kids trying to gain autonomy as kids, not so they can be adults. Nicky, Ricky, Dicky, and Dawn want to go to the mall by themselves or rent out the garage so their hijinks as kids can amplify, so they can go on adventures for adventure's sake. Unlike the pre-60s age equivalents, they're not in training school to become adults with parents as their teachers. In the old shows, the kids need their parents and are foolish when they think they don't, because they're trying to become like their parents. Later, the parents need their kids to need them and are foolish when they think they don't, because what's implied is being kids is what's cool, is what people strive to, is what you want to be. Not being parents like in the 50s, or being adults rather. One consequence of this focus on kids' culture and moments in these kids shows, and then also in films from the 80s to aughts like Breakfast Club, Glee, High School Musical, and Saved by the Bell, but more importantly, their downstream cultural influence and the influence of the culture that created them in the first place, at least for me and my friends, has been a hyper-awareness of all the milestones of childhood, and a deep understanding of how each of them should go before they happen, and a keen awareness of when they deviate from the norm. I remember on prom, I so badly wanted to have one of those big group pictures with everyone in a line in that prom hold, that when it looked like it wasn't going to happen and we were all going to leave the park where we were taking photos, I had everyone around me do it, even though we didn't, like, know each other that well. And when you force things like that, it doesn't work. Like, only half the people in the photo are even doing the traditional couple position. Another example is when my high school was more outdoor than it seemed like on TV. I was, like, aware of that and mildly disappointed. And I thought I definitely needed to play all the high school games, Truth or Dare, Spin the Bottle at some point if I hadn't yet. But not because any of those were, like, these awesome prizes that came from my true desires, but because the water I swam in told me that was the good stuff that I should do. Almost like a bucket list or points in a video game. Rather than embracing whatever was going on at that moment that I thought was good and trying to do more of stuff I liked and less stuff I didn't like, I had something else, a rubric of another sort in mind that was put into my head. I think I would have enjoyed those very American, very generational childhood moments more if I had gone into them without the baggage of a pre-made rubric that was evaluating beat by beat the event. I think I'm in that space now, but also I've passed a lot of the TV show kid moments. Like on my 21st birthday, I didn't have a beer, but I was able to enjoy what I did do with my friends instead of feeling like I wasn't doing the right thing when I was doing something else than drinking a beer. That's new too, by the way. It was actually Ronald Reagan that made the age of drinking 21 on the heels of, you'll never guess, a campaign by television shows to create more awareness about drunk driving. TV executives at NBC, CBS, and ABC literally got together and had their characters use the term designated driver on Cheers and LA Law, and that's how the term became used. 200 years ago, books may have been the most influential medium, which is why so many groups tried to ban or burn them. But today, TV has serious downstream effects on our culture. I've argued more about downstream effects here, but I also know a girl who became much more liberal in her attitudes towards sex after watching the movie Pleasantville, where the conceit of the movie is basically an old backwards town is unhappy and regressive because they're not all having sex with each other. And so Reese Witherspoon comes in and starts having sex with guys at the sock hop, and then everyone starts having sex, and their black and white world becomes colorful. And everyone embraces sex and modernity and rejects their stuffy morality of the past. And also, you guys might not remember this, but on Nickelodeon there was a season of a show called 100 Things to Do Before High School with Isabella Merced. Like, the thing about that is it's very modernist. 100 things you want to do in middle school, to do them. The things were all stuff the characters had heard was a good middle school adventure, or what a good middle school experience is supposed to be like staying up all night one time, or interacting with the popular girls at the lunch table.
This is middle school. It's our time to get crazy and live life.
It was very much a product of the American school hierarchy and ecosystem that began in the 60s and basically ended with lockdowns. But why that happened is for another video. I think kids' shows are an excellent and underrated indicator of what is culturally valued, because what we tell kids is what we want society to believe. And kids are very impressionable. A lot of the time, I spent more time getting an idea of what's normal and what I should value and what's cool from these TV shows, Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, something like that, than I did from my own parents. They were seen as square, like what? We get embarrassed by our parents now. That wasn't a concept before the 60s. In pre-modern times, the family unit and the roles of each person to the moral universe and social order was most important. By the modern period, it became more about how we felt about things, just like when we shifted to Impressionism in art. And by the postmodern period, it became about clicks and views and watch time. But now, the Zoomers are helping reshape a turn back towards sincerity. Thanks for watching. I think this is a really important analysis of how much TV and kids' TV that we've grown up with shapes our culture, and you don't really hear people talking about those shows, at least like outside of our circles, and no one's talked about what it means. So I wanted to make that. Tell me what you think about this. Do you have this kind of experience that me and my friends have about that self-awareness of these moments that you go through? Or do you not? Do you not relate to what I'm saying and you have a different take? Let me know down below. I'm really excited because this is an idea that I've been thinking about for a while. I want to hear what other people think about it. And let me know what you thought of the video if you want to see more things like this. Alright, thanks for watching.